Hello, everyone. This is Lunchtime on LinkedIn Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. I'm going to be doing a program, as you know, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on LinkedIn's new platform. I'm going to be talking to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, business leaders, and anybody else that's doing good things in the world about their secrets for success. So I want to find out what they do to make that makes them successful, that helps them be successful. And I want us to learn from that so that we can be better. The fun part about the show is that it's interactive. Yesterday we got some great questions with our guest Valentina Primo from all over the world that we didn't really get to during the program. We ended up doing a lot of that after the program, but we can take your questions, and if we don't get to them during the show, John and I will certainly try to answer them via social media after the show. And this is brought to you by, this is possible because of Social Live and their platform and their work with LinkedIn. We're also simulcasting on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube and Periscope as well. Today, I can't wait to get to this conversation. I've got somebody I met probably a year or 2 years ago in Salt Lake City, and we reconnected a couple of months ago when, John, you gave a talk to our Marshall Goldsmith group about your story and about the book that you got. We're going to talk about the book today. John's got a new book that's called Your Amazing Itty Bitty Guide to Being TED-Worthy, 15 Essential Secrets. I had to read this as a long title. 15 Essential Secrets to Successful Speaking based on human neurobiology. He's a TED format expert. He's an expert in leadership, presence, and pitching. He's a sought-after and world-renowned expert in communications and coach. John, hey, man, it's great to have you. I know you're in Virginia Beach doing some exciting stuff, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Rhett. Happy to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I want to jump into sort of how you got started. I was blown away when you did that talk for us a couple of months ago with our Marshall Goldsmith group about how failure changed your life, and you shared your story with us and how that shaped who you are and took you down the path that you're going down today, that you're still on. Tell the audience about that, because I just think it's incredible how failure shaped you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like there's a term, ikigai, that I just heard of, and maybe I heard of it from you, but IKIGAI,
yeah.
And it's where, what you get paid for, what you love. You told me about that, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I feel like I just failed at everything else because I was supposed to do this, is kind of what I feel like. So I've always been the guy who had the soft skills, and I always worked with a lot of people with the hard skills, and I was always envious of them. They got paid more, they had more education, they seemed better, And I worked at startup companies for my whole life. So I always had $50,000 worth of debt, personal debt, and I have millions of dollars worth of stock that never turned into anything.
You and me both, brother.
And I would always end up being the evangelist for the company. So I would speak at conferences. I'd fly all over the world and talk to the press and be on TV and newspapers and everything. But I always felt like I was, not as valuable as the people with the hard skills. And so I'd go around trying to prove I was valuable, and it felt like I wasn't as valuable. It was just awkward. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time, and I was just blown away by the power of those short, well-done speeches. And I'd always been a public speaker, but I had never been doing that. And so I came back, got really involved in TEDx, super interested in what was going on there. And at one of the very first ever TEDx events at TEDx Santa Monica,
right,
my friends were running it, I was volunteering. We had this guy who had all of the hard skills in the world and a really interesting topic. I was super excited to see him speak. But when he started to talk, I, along with everybody else in the room, just checked out because he was so awkward and nervous. We all felt like we were going to throw up. And it was something that I had seen so much in my career, people with brilliant ideas who just couldn't quite communicate them well enough to actually get them out to the world. So part of me was just disappointed and kind of sad. The evil part of me was going, ha, 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 you know, he can't do it, guy with the hard skills, ha, ha. And as I was indulging that, my buddy Michael Weiss walked over and he leaned down and he said, John, you know, we got to do something to help people like this. And that moment was just a liminal moment for me. The clouds parted. I realized if I just got over myself for 5 freaking minutes, I could make a big difference for that guy. If I stopped honoring the chip on my shoulder and started honoring the people around me, I could make a difference. So I created what I now have the thrill and honor to present all over the world, called the Speak Like a Leader Bootcamp. But because of that guy, I based everything I did in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology, so I could show people not only what works when it comes to communicating and leading human beings, but why it works based in science. And that turned out to just completely change my life. And you know, Rhett, that moment, I think the big failure for me that I identify as my number one big failure was when I had a .com company called bigwords.com.
Right.
And we raised $80 million plus and then went out of business in the .com crash. And I was the face of that company. And I was so ashamed and hurt and angry and just every negative emotion you can imagine that I almost died of an autoimmune disease really soon after that, brought on by lack of sleep and stress.
Right.
And as I was sitting in the hospital thinking that I was, you know, it didn't look good for me. You know, they didn't think I was going to necessarily walk out. And I realized something really big for myself was that I had been really small. My context was opportunity only knocks once, and I'm going to succeed. And I wanted to take other people with me, sure, but like it was about me and succeeding, and there was, you know, only one knock that I was going to get. So when I failed, there was no room in that context for me anymore. And I almost died just squished up against the walls of that.
Right.
And as I sat there thinking I might not walk out, I you know, I don't know that I believe in God, but I was talking to the beingness of the universe and saying, hey, if I get out of here, I want to do things differently. And I just want to make a difference.
That was your purpose.
That's all I care about.
Your purpose of all, it changed.
It sure did. It sure did. And, you know, that experience profoundly changed my approach. And when I discovered this Speak Like a Leader stuff that I'm doing now, a couple years later, everybody told me, John, you don't want to do that. You know, like that's a terrible idea. You know, don't do that. So I cried about it for a little while. And then I just decided, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Because like I had no other options at that point. Everything had dried up, including the jobs that paid too little and gave me stock that was useless. They were even gone.
Right.
And so I stepped into doing this. You know, I didn't light the boats on fire, but when they caught on fire, at least I didn't put them out. And I stepped into doing this. And because of that experience, I think I focused more on providing value. I said, look, I know I provide value at this. I'm going to stop worrying about making money, and I'm just going to go after providing value. And for the first year and a half, I went further in debt. But by the end of year 2 into year 3, I made more than I ever made in my life. And then I doubled that, and then I tripled that, and then I made even more than that. And what I realized is when I was ultra focused on money, I had debt. But when I shifted the focus just a little bit to really focusing on how do I provide the greatest value, it wasn't all of a sudden, but over time, I made money. And, you know, I think all of those things, all of those massive failures, just failure after failure after failure, makes me much better at doing what I do now, because I don't think there's anything that anybody else could do that would be dumber than something I did. So I have a lot of compassion and room for that.
Well, I think what you're saying then, and I totally agree, when you shift that focus to the long-term outlook, right? And not the short-term money, but
Yes.
you start thinking about it in the long term, and you start thinking about it by providing that value. I think that's when you're better. That's when you're better at what you're doing, right? Because it has a purpose and has a meaning, and it's in sync with the values that you have. So you try to teach people. I mean, you do teach people, and you explain how to communicate. But you also teach people about the underlying reasons why.
Yes. Yeah.
So what is that? Tell me about that, because I think that was another thing when we were talking that really stuck out to me and kind of hit home to me. Is I'm the person I've got to know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why somebody's going to react the way they're going to react.
Yeah. I mean, I created this for you, Rhett. So I can give you, it's the fundamental piece of everything else that I do is the human brain. And, I say communicating with human beings is not logical, it's biological. And if you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But logic by itself is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So do you want me to talk about why that is?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So at the most fundamental level, if we took a cross section of a human brain and looked down on it, we would see the brain stem, and then wrapped around that, the midbrain. And together, these two pieces make up what's called the paleo-mammalian brain, or the limbic system, or the emotional brain. Those are three names for the same thing. And this part of our brain has been around for a really long time. And wrapped around it is the cerebral cortex, also known as the neocortex. Mm-hmm. And neo means new. So that's the new brain wrapped around the old, ancient paleo-mammalian brain. Okay. And here's what comes out of that biology. This part, the old part, has been around for much longer, and it does not have access to language or logic or reason, but it does have access to our senses on a much deeper level than the new brain ever will. And so it smells things like pheromones, it sees things like facial microgestures, body language that we never would notice consciously, smells things, hears things, notices patterns in things that we'll never notice consciously. But because it doesn't have access to language, it can't just tell us, hey, I smell those pheromones and, that guy wants to fight you or whatever. The way it communicates with us is through gut feelings.
Okay.
That's your paleo-mammalian ancient brain that's super dialed into reality, communicating with you, gut feelings.
Okay. Yeah? Fight or flight. That's those natural hair on the back of your neck kind of.
Exactly. Okay. And look, if the elevator door opens and the hair on your neck stands up and you don't feel good about getting in there, don't do it. Your paleo-mammalian brain smells the pheromones or sees the facial microgestures, and it knows something's bad is about to happen. And if that's a good person in there, they would want you to listen to your gut. And if it's a bad person, you don't want to be in there anyway, right? Right. So listen to your gut. But we all think we're logical, right? Like, oh, John, I'm Rhett. I weigh things out. I'm going to make a logical choice here.
Right.
And you may do all the logical steps to weigh things out and consider things. But at the end of the day, when you make that choice, your paleo-mammalian ancient brain fires first, making the decision. And then right after that, your neocortex, the new brain, fires, either agreeing with or disagreeing with, but not making the decision. Okay. And so here's how that plays out on the court in life. Do you like the product? Oh, yeah, I like the product. Mm-hmm. Think it's priced right? Oh, yeah, good price. Mm-hmm. Do you think it'd make a difference for you to have it? Why, certainly, yeah, it would be great. Well, do you want to sign the check and we'll start delivery? No. No. Think about it for a little while longer, right?
Yep.
So you've experienced that before, right?
A few times.
Yeah, me too. And I do a lot of, as you said, I do a lot of pitch coaching for nonprofits and people who are raising venture capital in places like Accenture where they're out pitching big clients. And people get angry when that happens. They're like, were they lying to me? Like, what? Yes, 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 no. What's that about, right? So, well, here's what that's about. They were not lying. Here's what happened. Yes, 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 no. Logic, 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 emotion. We did not make the emotional connection with them. We didn't put their ancient paleo mammalian brain at ease, so they couldn't say yes. They couldn't take action because the ancient part of the brain has its hands on the steering wheel. So the logical brain's yes, 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 and the paleo mammalian ancient brain says nope.
I see. I would have thought it had the. I would have instinctually. I would have thought it was the other way around, right? But yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense what you're saying.
Here's why you need logic, so you can justify the paleo mammalian's decision, right?
Okay.
That's why Mercedes-Benz tells everybody about all the great mechanics and engineering, because they want a Mercedes, they need to justify it.
Right, right.
So, that is at the fundamental basis of everything that I do on some level, is that juxtaposition. And what you said, Rhett, is what I see all the time. What we see modeled out there in business and in life in general is not only often not what works best with human beings, but it's almost always 180 degrees from what works best with human beings. Mm-hmm. So understanding that, I think, is an absolute key. And then bringing that, I tell people, if you don't make an emotional connection, all your logic is just going to bounce off and make no difference. So don't jump right to the business plan without somehow connecting with them, because it won't matter anyway.
So you've got to make it safe. You got to make it a safe decision.
Yes. Yep. And that's a good way to say it, Rhett, because I think people go, wait a minute, I got to make an emotional connection. You mean I have to sing Kumbaya and we all have to hold hands and cry? No, just make it safe. Put that paleo mammalian brain at ease. Let it know that you're both in the same tribe somehow. You both care about something the same, and
connect with it, right?
Say it again. Yeah, connect with it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things you said a lot is that great leaders have to be great communicators, and so yes. How do you, if I'm sitting in my office right now, CEO, listening to us talk about this, and I know that I'm not great at communication, kind of all the way around, not just getting up on the stage and speaking.
Yeah.
Because that's something you do on a once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Every day we communicate to our teams and we communicate to our vision and everything else, and that's important. How do you get better? How do you even start? I mean, what are the most important aspects of it for a leader in terms of trying to improve, and how do you get started? I mean, I just there's so much information out there, and
yeah. Here's the thing, and I'll say this maybe a few times, but communicating with human beings is not logical, it's biological.
Right.
And so I would say, if to someone in that situation, how can you find a story that will connect with the people that are following you, that you're leading, that will give them some insight into what makes you tick and what you care about and why you're doing what you're doing? And one of the things that I think is a fundamental leadership characteristic is that a great leader will continuously, ongoingly, in different ways, at different times, remind everyone that's following them of the empowering context for what you're all doing. And your stories, Rhett, things that matter to you, things that touch you, if you share those with us, with the intention of connecting with us and giving us something meaningful, that we just want to hear those things all day long.
Okay.
And that's a great place to start,
right.
Just think about, why are you doing what you're doing now versus all the things you could be doing? Because you've had choices to make the whole way, and you chose this, every time, something that led you to here versus any of those other things that you were interested in and thought maybe you should do, but then you chose this. All of those moments are a great point to pull out a story that illustrates some aspect of what matters to you. And that's how you can build the company culture and get people aligned around the same values and following the same vision, is through those stories.
When you coach, you've coached, I mean, you're coaching at NASA, you're coaching at Johnson & Johnson, Accenture, yeah. Coke, Oracle. I mean, you're coaching some of the bigger companies in the world, and you've been doing this a bit. What are some of the common issues you see when you go into a company in terms of their communication? I mean, are there some common problems that you see?
Sure, and I would say that at different levels and in different ways, one of the fundamental problems that I see is, because it's what we see modeled so often, people come in and they want to look good and they want to establish their credibility. And that actually has a way of really pushing people away and turning people off. And I worked with a really big manufacturing company that manufactures like space age stuff in the United States and is a Fortune 10 or 15 company. And they were having a global summit. And everybody that I worked on was going to give a TED-like talk at this summit. And everybody came in and they wanted to establish their credibility. I mean, lots of them said that. And I said, well, okay,
Yeah, I've said that.
Yeah, I have too. In fact, I thought that was what I was supposed to do back in the day. Right. Because what we see modeled is almost always not what works and often 180 degrees from what works. Right. So I said to them, now look, I read a study a while ago that said that if you have letters after your name and somebody comes to your office, your credibility is already assumed. And I got to believe that when you're on stage with a card that says you're running this division of this company and you're now the one they picked to put on stage, your credibility is already assumed. And if you try to establish it on top of that, it'll actually tarnish it. So we're not going to, homie, don't play that. So we're going to start with a story that connects them with you and gives them an insight into why you care so much about what you're doing now. And it turned out to be the most, well done, best conference that the woman I was working with had ever done in her 25-year career at this huge company. And she credited me with a lot of that, which was a huge compliment. But it kind of freaked me out. I had to figure out why. What happened? What was that? Why does this keep happening? So I sat and ran the whole thing through my mind over and over and over again. And it came down to this for me, Rhett. The environment that was created by those talks had the customers much more open. They ran to the breakout sessions instead of away from them. And they were very vocal and talking a lot and sharing and very open. And that's what they wanted. Well, here's why that happened, I think. Because these people did not get up and try to establish their credibility. We put a stop to that. They got up and they shared something vulnerable and meaningful and sometimes even a little bit, really vulnerable.
Authentic.
Very, very authentic.
Yeah.
And what happened was they didn't establish their credibility. They established what I call your emotional credibility. And that's what had that whole thing go so fabulously well. Okay. Does that land with you?
No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
That's the name of my next book, by the way. I have the website. I'm working on the copyrights. But emotional credibility for me is what it really comes down to.
Well, it's not an arrogance, right? When you get up and when you're on stage, you're on stage for a reason usually.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good segue to my next question, because in the book, you talk about, I love this. You said, if you are speaking 20 minutes to an audience of 3,000, you're taking 1,000 hours of human time. So you better have something to say.
Yep.
How do you know if what you say is relevant and valuable? How do you know?
Boy, it's a good question. And I'll tell you, got a crazy roommate up here called your monkey mind. if you're anything like me, it's always telling me this is not valuable. No one's going to like this. This isn't going to work. Rah, 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 right? So, but there's,
I mean, that,
you know, so there's two sides to this, I would say. One is, and the more close to the vest one, if what you are sharing has made a difference for you and meant something to you and touched you and moved you, it will do that for any other human being on earth if you just authentically share it with them. Okay. So to fundamentally look for the things that made a difference for you and then just share them. And then, you know, over there where they are, watch their faces and listen to what they come talk to you about afterwards. I think people will always want to come say, hey, that was a great speech, you know? So I nice to hear that, but I don't put a lot of stock in that. If people come up and they say, hey, that was a great speech, you know what? That thing about you losing your company, man, I went bankrupt once too. And they start to tell me about, okay, I'm like, now I think I really did make a connection and I really did make a difference. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, Rhett, if, you know, like I say in that piece in the book, if I'm not worth all the time and resources and attention and everything that goes into my training, because everybody's got to be there and they're being paid to be there and they buy lunch and they fly me in and they pay me and everything. If I'm not worth 10 times or 100 or 1,000 times that, I'm not going to get invited back very much. So if I'm getting invited back, that gives me a signal that, okay, I need to trust that this is making a difference, even in those moments when I'm feeling insecure and the monkey's really loud.
So I know the monkey. That's a great analogy. That's what people are going to take away. I know the monkey. That's what people are going to take away. The book. Okay, so the book I think is essential for anybody that wants to do a TED Talk, no doubt. What are the other takeaways from the book that you think people should have, and then tell us where we can get it and all that, all the essentials there.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I think, I mean, you know, so I think it's 30 pages long. It's 15 secrets that are each 2 pages. So everything in there, from my point of view, had to be in there. You know, that is, It was hard to boil it all down to that. And I think it's more valuable because it's so short.
Right.
But one of the big takeaways in there that I think I even repeated it twice because I think it's so important. I know from experience that a lot of people think that these fabulous TED Talks are people getting up who are just so wonderful and brilliant and great that they just get up and wing it and it's that good. Guess what? Couldn't be further from the truth. Most of the people who are speaking on the TED stage have been working on it and getting coached and going back and iterating it and making it better for at least 6 months or a year or more. That was eye-opening to me. Yeah. And then I do some work still today with a very good friend of mine who worked with Steve Jobs for his entire career pretty much. And he was right there working with Steve on all these fabulous speeches. And we call Steve Jobs a natural communicator because those things were so good. Well, here's the thing that I don't think I knew. I know I didn't know. I don't think most people know. The reason he was so good is because after they spent all the time it took to write that talk and craft it all together as a team, he would commit to practicing for an hour for every minute he was going to be on stage. So for that 45-minute talk, he would practice for 45 hours delivering that thing.
That's incredible.
You'd be a pretty natural communicator if you did that too, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's a great takeaway. Where can they get the book? Where can they find more on you to bring you in to help sort out communications and coach? Tell us all about that because the site's looking great.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell us how people can find you.
So, so the site, my website is executivespeakingsuccess.com, and you can find some videos there. I also have a YouTube channel /exec speaking, where I've gathered a bunch of videos, some of my own, some of the great TED Talks that I think are fabulous, that kind of stuff. And then the book is for sale at Amazon. That's the easiest place to find it. Just type in, itty bitty Tedworthy, and it'll probably pop up. And it's both the Kindle version and a physical version. And, I'm all for the Kindle version. I think the physical version is nice to have because I made it with the thought of it sitting somewhere near your desk. And when you've got a talk coming up, just flip through there and make sure you're doing all 15 of those things, and you will have an out of the ballpark hit every time. That's my word to you.
That's all right. That's a great takeaway. Hey, I want to thank everybody that was watching today. We've got a bunch of comments, but no questions, but good comments. But thanks for all those that were regulars. I see Dr. Terry Jackson on, Greg Larkin. Thank you guys for tuning in. Bradley Chapman, you guys were all on watching today. So anyway, thank you guys. We'll be back next week for another a couple shows. And John, hey man, thank you for joining us today. And I'm back to that skydiving.
Yeah, there we go.
So that you're doing over in Virginia Beach. But take care, and we'll chat.